Hey guys, my name is Moise and I'm a medical student at a university in Ontario. And I'm making this video here today to show you how to ace Casper as someone who did Casper last year and got fourth quartile. So why don't we get right into it now? Now, what is Casper? You can read about what exactly it is on its website, which I'll link in the description. But essentially, it's kind of a test of what would you do in tough situations. And oftentimes, a lot of times with Casper, people are unsure what are the evaluators looking for? What are they marking me based off of? This can kind of cause a lot of confusion, but I assure you it's not as hard as it seems. It's actually quite clear what they're marking on us on. And so why don't I now go ahead and show you? Okay, so now I'm right here on Google and I'm going to search up the Casper test, right? Casper for 2023-2024 takers. And if you go on the RIPES website, it's right here what Casper assesses for. In your answers, what they're looking for is for you to show collaboration, communication, empathy, equity, ethics, motivation, and problem solving, professionalism, resilience, and self-awareness. So that's what they're looking for you to show while you're doing this test. Okay. So if you want to imagine when they're marking your answers, they may have some sort of rubric that looks like this and is kind of ticking off, or to what extent are you showing these qualities? So it's really important that you keep these in consideration while you're practicing and while you're writing down your answers, because this really is the key here. Okay, so why don't we get right into it now? How do we actually go about answering questions? Okay, so the first thing to make sure to do is to read the question. Make sure to read it properly. Because oftentimes you can kind of, when you're in a panic mode, you can kind of gaze over what's going on, and that can be really quite detrimental to your answer, right? So make sure that you take your time and you do read it properly. Now, it's also best to not make any assumptions. Don't go into the situation thinking you have all the facts, right? Even though the question's there, but make sure to focus on what's written in the question, not maybe your own beliefs or from your own experiences, what have happened. It's usually best to leave that out. Okay. Once you've read the question, the next step is to answer the question, right? And the best way to go about answering a question is using a framework. The one that I think is the best to use, there are a lot out there, but is the PPR DJF framework. So problem, perspective, responsibility, decision, justify, and future. So what do each of these things mean? Why don't we get into that? So, problem. Okay, so the first thing you want to answer the question is by stating what is the problem and really try to identify the main part, right? What's the main stake of the issue? And verbalize really what the ethical dilemma is, right? Usually in these questions, there's some sort of ethical dilemma, right? And so it's important you straight up write what the ethical dilemma is and give both sides of what that dilemma is. Okay. Now that covers the problem aspect. After that, you can move on to the perspective aspect. Okay. Now, here, what you're doing is first, you want to gather more information about the situation. Remember how I said we don't want to jump to any conclusions, right? So this might be you say that you want to ask questions of these different individuals who are involved, right? To gain background on each person's situation so you can better understand their perspective. Again, what this shows to the evaluator is that you're critically thinking about really what steps led to this circumstance in question. Now, again, it's also important to show that you're gathering more information because what this does is it shows a bit of skepticism. Showing the skepticism is important because it also shows that you don't just take everything at face value, right? And that you do dig deeper, which is also very much important. Another thing is also showing this thing about others' perspectives is that you also collaborate with them, right? You may say that, for example, in a prompt that's asking about you're working at a company, you may say that you will discuss with your other colleagues, your seniors, supervisors, and help get their advice too, right? So what this does is it shows that you're a collaborator, right? Which is also very important. Again, if this is also again, so now what you do is you explore the different perspectives of each individual, right? And the different parties, whoever's involved, sometimes it may be different colleagues, right? Explore the perspective of each individual. Where are they coming from? What this does is it shows that you're being empathetic, right? Which is something they love to see in the answers. And also explore your own perspective too, right? We'll talk more about this though. What are your thoughts? How are you going to be feeling in a situation like this? What do you have to take into consideration? And again, if there may be some sort of policy question too. So it's best to show both sides of the argument, right? Or if there's a policy or an argument kind of question, give the pros and cons of each side. Okay, after you've done that, you go on to responsibility, right? Here's where you discuss what are your responsibilities. Again, this is where you can talk more about your own perspective. It may be that, for example, if the question is that you're working in a hospital and something happens to a patient, what responsibilities do you have, right? Or this may be a situation where one of your friends is going to be drunk driving. What responsibilities do you have, right? So this may be, I have a responsibility to make sure that all individuals' well-being is taken care of and ensuring the safety of my friend too, right? So it can be a really short line like this. I have an example that you can use is one that I use. It's really general and you can kind of just pop it in there and it really sounds good and it contributes towards the answer. Okay. The next part is the decision. Okay. It's always important to end with action. Don't have a wishy-washy kind of answer where you don't really say anything, right? It's important that you're firm with a decision, right? If the question asks you specifically for what you're going to do or what would you say, it's important you say something, right? Not just bouncing around the question, right? It won't show great qualities if you do decide to do something like that. Okay. Now, it's important to do that because you also need to answer the question, right? And when you're doing this, one thing that's important to do is you can talk about how you're going to be doing, right? Make notes on your demeanor, gestures, tone, and try to paint a picture of how you're going to be doing this. So if this means you're going to have a conversation with an individual, for example, taking that example of a friend who's going to be drunk driving, you can maybe say that I'll be pulling him aside and making sure that we have a sensitive conversation if you guys are in a group, making sure it's in a private area where you feel safe too, right? Which is important. and explain how you're going to be an active listener. And this allows, to complete a more picture of how you're going to be going about doing this. Another really important way that you can use is to use the if-then technique when you're saying your decision, right? Because there's many possibilities and you're not given many details, right? So you could say, if my friend still decides to drink and drive, I may have to inform the police, right? Or if he chooses then not to, then we can leave the matter there, right? So you can use if-then statements for your decision to cover a wide array of possibilities, and it makes your answer well-rounded. Now, it's also important to realize that there is no one correct answer, right? So again, using that if-then possibility allows if-then statement allows you to convey and cover multiple perspectives and possibilities. Okay. What's the next part? The next part is justify. This is where you consider all concerns, also consider all concerns and consequences, right? Who's going to be impacted by the decision that you've made? What consequences may be a result of your decision? If there might be some negative consequences. And again, where you're talking about those if-then scenarios, right? This shows that you're being also analytical, right? It also shows that you're taking into account that while you did make a decision, there may be some negatives to them, but you are aware of them, which is really important and shows you're being analytical, you're thinking through the decisions that you've made. And it's also important here to justify why you made the correct decision, right? That's why we have this as part of the framework. Okay, and lastly, now this section is usually really small that you write up, and it just says some future, right? This could be where you write something like, I will follow up later with this situation or with the individuals involved to make sure that the problem is truly resolved, or to make sure that the same issue doesn't arise again. Okay, great. So now why don't we go over some overall tips that are really important to keep in mind? Okay. Oh, before we do that, actually, there's another category of questions that you could be asked, which is personal questions. They usually ask you to reflect on some sort of failure or some sort of other event that have happened in your own life. So it's best to reflect on your life beforehand. I'll be posting a list of questions that you can take a look at in the description and on the website. So you can try to answer these questions before you go into the test. So if you have those memories, those stories fresh in your head, you'll be able to type them up or say them out loud a lot faster, right? So personal reflection questions. The golden rule for answering questions like this is to, again, prepare life experiences. If there's any sort of failure, anything went wrong, don't blame others. This won't look good. It won't show that level of maturity that's really important. State what you've learned from the experience if it's applicable, and get to the point quickly and make sure to stay on topic. I think many times I've seen with students who are prepping for Casper is that when they're telling the story, it kind of starts to get off topic, maybe too many details and things that aren't really relevant and aren't contributing to making their answers stronger in the ways that we talked about when Casper is looking for. And now for some overall tips, right? The power of wording is really important, right? So imagine if someone says in their response that I will talk to this person versus I will be sure to be sensitive, create a private environment where I will take him aside and first actively listen to what his complaints are and then suggest the ideas that I had to resolve them. Okay, so did you see the difference, right? It's a lot better that latter way. Okay. Now, another tip too, this is a more advanced one, is if you look further down the questions for that prompt, you'll see something like, if you did this, what would happen? Or it would say, assume that you did a certain answer, what would happen, right? And so what this shows is sometimes the question prompts will lead you down a specific answer, right? So, for example, if the prompt is, would you help a lady cross the street, a senior lady cross the street, right? That's the prompt. And then that's question one is, would you help? Question one is, how would you approach the situation? And question two might be something like, if you decide to help the lady, how would you go about doing it, right? So what this does is it allows you to see that, for question one, that's what you should have done. That's the way you should go about doing it. Okay. Another tip to keep in mind is sometimes the questions do overlap. So it's best to read them all before you start. So in your mind, you're not repeating yourself, or you're not answering maybe question three in question two already, right? Because then there's nothing left for that section. Now, timing. So you have 5 minutes to answer each question. So what you want to do is, first question should be within 5 to 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Then 3 minutes to 20 seconds, you to 1 minute and 40 seconds, you want to answer the second question, and then 1 minute and 40 seconds to 0 seconds. Time's almost done. You want to answer your third question. Another tip too is always follow the law. Never do anything that's illegal. I think this happens a lot of times when I've seen students giving responses, is they start suggesting or doing stuff that's illegal. You definitely don't want to do that, as it doesn't show very much maturity and ethicalness in your responses. Now, really important question students say is, how am I going to be able to type up all this, or type this all up during my response time? I only got like 5 minutes to do it, right? So to do that, you have to also work on improving your typing speed. That's a really big part of it, right? So here's a website that I used actually. It's actually a great website. It's called Fast Fingers, right? And well, here you can easily, right, type up, do the tests, and it'll be really helpful to you. Okay. Now, the last part is how to practice for Casper. So what you want to do is you want to use something called progressive overload. So when you first start doing a prompt or questions, you want to start off by giving yourself untimed, right? See how long it takes you to answer it as thoroughly as you can, right? So maybe 10, 12 minutes. Then after you do that for a day or two, or depending on how much time you have, I would suggest a month would be the best, but even 2 weeks can work. After you do that for a day or two, you want to then cut it down to 8 minutes, right? See how much of a response you can get done in that. After doing that for a couple of days, you want to cut it down to 7 minutes. Try to answer the question in 7 minutes for a couple of days, and then build your way to being able to answer the question completely in 5 minutes, right? Another really important thing is practice questions are key. You can even use ChatGPT to give you ethical response questions and Casper style questions to answer. And I'll have a PDF of questions attached to some that I've come up on, some that I've found that have been really good for you to practice. And so overall, that's all the tips that I have preparing for Casper. So I wish you the best of luck with Casper. And don't worry, it's not a difficult test. You got this. Just follow the tips that I have, and feel free to reach out to me or on my website, and I'll be sure to help you as much as I possibly can. No matter what you're applying to, Casper is really important for medical school here, and either other dentistry and even some pharmacy schools. So even for nursing school too. So I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you later.